Last one in this series is Ewan Edwards, and I hope you have been able to find the speakers room, Ewan. Yes.
Yeah, I'm
You're
here.
From
I hope you can
Marine
all hear
Scotland
me.
Science, Aberdeen, Scotland. Welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Hans. Thanks for the welcome, and yeah, best wishes to everybody from Aberdeen, where the temperature is currently 21 degrees, and anyone who's familiar with the north of Scotland knows that it doesn't break 20 degrees very often. So I wanted to give you a little bit more context about our fine wee country up here in the north of the North Sea. So Scotland's quite a small country with the main landmass is only about 400 kilometres south to north, but it has an extensive and complex coastline with several major island groups off the coast. And as you can see from the map here, it's got an enormous maritime area. So in the North Sea region, we border with the Faroe Islands to the north and Norway to the east, and our friends south of the border in England to the south there. The maritime economy is dominated mainly by two industries currently: oil and gas, since the discovery of oil in the North Sea in the early 70s, and Scotland remains a major producer of hydrocarbons from rocks below the seabed, and a small but busy fishing industry operating around both coasts and the Northern Isles. A little introduction to Marine Scotland, the organisation that I work for. It's quite an interesting organisation because we're a core department of the Scottish Government, so along the same lines as the Department of Health and Department of Education. We have a department for marine affairs. And Marine Scotland has the responsibility to manage all marine activities other than most aspects of oil and gas exploration and production. Marine Scotland Science is one of the divisions, and it's ourselves. I sit within Marine Scotland Science, and we've been primarily involved in the JOMOPANS project. So what activities happen in our seas, and where does the noise come from? I've already mentioned fishing briefly. We've got a relatively small in terms of number of people employed, but a very active and wide-ranging fishing industry with quite a large footprint across our national waters. In fact, a far larger footprint than any other activity occurring in our marine area. Trawl fishing is a major component of that, both for whitefish, the map in the middle of the three there, and nephrops, Norway lobster, langoustine, which is much more concentrated around certain types of seabed, sediment type, but where it's prevalent, it's quite an intensive fishing activity. We also had a fairly extensive inshore fishing fleet operating both creels, static creels for crabs, lobster, and langoustine as well as inshore trawlers mostly for langoustine and some fish species. So in addition to fishing, we have quite a busy marine area in terms of shipping, and much of this is just a screen grab from marine traffic that I've showed here. You can see much of the shipping activity emanates from the coast of northeast Scotland, especially the port of Aberdeen, which is the major harbour servicing the offshore, the oil and gas industry in Scottish waters. So much of this traffic is associated with oil and gas production, with an increasing amount of traffic associated with offshore wind farm construction, as well as operation and maintenance. I'll come back to offshore renewables shortly. Some fishing vessels also transmit AIS, but as has been mentioned a couple of times today, not all fishing activity is captured within the data sets that have been available within JOMOPANS. So in addition to AIS data, we have a fishing vessel monitoring system, and the UK on the whole maintains quite quite restrictive access to those data. So fishing vessel data have not been very well represented, perhaps in JOMOPANS for UK waters and Scottish waters in particular. So I mentioned offshore renewables. The industry currently is centred around eastern Scotland, with two main clusters in the Moray Firth to the north, and then the Forth and Tay region, as visible on this map. There's only one of those wind farms is under construction, the one in the darkest colour of blue, but there's consent in place to build two more large wind farms, and there's at the planning stage, the two southernmost sites that you can see on that map in the middle are going to be some very, very large wind farms if they're awarded consent. I think both of them, or individually, they're expected to be 2 gigawatt developments. So potentially several hundred turbines out in the outer reaches of the Forth and Tay region. We also currently, as far as I'm aware, we still have the world's largest floating wind farm, High Wind, which is off the North Aberdeenshire coast, developed by Equinor, the Norwegian energy company. It's a development of only 5 turbines, but it's for a long time it's been the largest floating wind farm in the world. And that brings me on to the future plans. We have this recently published sectoral marine plan for offshore wind energy, which has identified a further 15 plan options around the coast of Scotland. 10 of these in the North Sea, but some further west along the north coast. And the plan is to develop 10 gigawatts of electricity generation capacity. This could mean up to 1,000 new turbines. I guess as the technology advances, the turbines get bigger and so fewer are required. But it's going to be a big part of our marine industry for the next 10 years and going forward from there. Some early discussions with some developers have suggested that they're going to be using a combination of fixed foundations and floating devices. And of course, all of these developments come with their associated environmental uncertainties. In addition to these large commercial scale generation of electricity for domestic and onshore purposes, we also have some smaller considerations of projects to electrify oil and gas platforms and to produce hydrogen and for purposes of carbon capture offshore as well. So certainly the Scottish North Sea is becoming an ever busier location, especially in the context of offshore renewables. So back in 2012, the first applications for offshore wind farms started to come into Marine Scotland as the marine industry's regulator. And it was identified that we knew comparatively little about the distribution of small cetaceans, especially outside of an inshore special area of conservation in the inner Moray Firth. So up in the north of that map in the centre, that is the Moray Firth region, and the inshore area there's a large special area of conservation for bottlenose dolphins. But the dolphins have been increasingly seen ranging down the coast of Scotland and further afield, down into northern English waters especially. So back in 2013, Kate Brooks, who leads the marine mammal research and advice at Marine Scotland Science, set up the East Coast Marine Mammal Acoustics Study, known as ECOMAS. And that project continues to this day, monitoring small cetaceans using CPODs. And on each of on 1 in 3 of the CPOD moorings, we've also been using a broadband sound recorder. So that's sound recorders at 10 of the 30 sites. In addition to the East Coast monitoring through ECOMAS, we've also been involved in 2 other interreg projects which have collected some acoustic data in Western waters, but I won't go into any details on that today. So data from ECOMAS were incorporated into this paper back in 2016 by Nathan Merchant, and this was the first assessment of average noise levels in UK waters. And in fact, we contributed data from 10 of our ECOMAS sites to this study. And from this study, I guess it was somewhat based on this study that JOMOPANS developed. So our activities in JOMOPANS have included the use or the continued use of some of these East Coast ecomass data from the 2 sites there labelled Helmsdale and Arbroath, as well as having identified two further offshore sites, one in the Outer Moray Firth, which aimed to be in a quieter area, and one out in the centre of the North Sea. Well, it was through discussion with JOMOPANS partners we identified that there's a large area in the central North Sea with comparatively low levels of shipping activity, and we wanted to try and characterise the soundscape there. We use autonomous sound recorders moored at the seabed using a single point mooring, and every mooring we put out, we also include a C-pod to collect some cetacean echolocation clip detections as well. And we tend to leave them out for 3 or 4 months at a time. The acoustic releases that we use should be good to secure them close to the seabed for over a year. But obviously, the more frequently you recover the mooring, the more likely you are to get some data in the hand. So we had some mixed success with data collection for JOMOPANS. The East Coast sites, Helmsdale and Arbroath, have been fairly successful. The Outer Moray Firth mooring, we lost one device that we deployed. We went out with a vessel with an ROV and multi-beam echo sounder to search for it, but I think we assume that it's been trawled away by some fishing activity. And then the Central North Sea mooring was a last-minute opportunity. We managed to get it on a passing vessel in October 2019, and it was deployed at the end of October. But at that point, we had no plan of how to actually get it back again. It was a classic case of deploy and forget. And eventually, it was recovered during an international fishing survey last August. So it was in situ for quite a long time, and it led to some delays in getting the data back. So yeah, as I said, we used the C-pod on every mooring, but those data weren't utilised in JOMOPANS. The primary instrument was the Loggerhead DSG-ST sound recorder, but I think there was some data were collected with new Loggerhead devices, and some were collected using Wildlife Acoustics sound recorders. Most of the fieldwork was conducted from our 2 vessels. Alban Amara is our inshore vessel, mostly does fish surveys in coastal waters. But the Central North Sea mooring was deployed from Scotia, which is our much larger vessel. So it hasn't just been myself working on this. I've been heavily supported by several other colleagues on the fieldwork side of things. There's an image there of one of our moorings laid out on the deck of the Scotia, showing the acoustic release system and the sound recorder. So they're quite small and compact. They sit within a few meters of the seabed, and when they're recovered, the whole thing floats to the surface, and we can recover the entire mooring. So a little more about our involvement in JOMOPANS. Well, we were already quite good at putting the recorders out there through our experiences in the Ecomass project. We were a little bit less good about getting them back again. We do have some ongoing conflicts with fishermen. Well, not so much conflicts, but now and again we will lose gear. The fishermen trawl it up, and sometimes they report it and return it to us. Sometimes we imagine that it gets thrown in the sea only to turn up on the beaches of Scandinavia a few months later. But we were largely very inexperienced in what to actually do with the ambient sound data that we've collected. So I should just highlight Hannah Miller there on the images to the right. Hannah joined our team as a bioacoustician in the middle of last year. And looking towards any possible extensions of the project, Hannah is likely to take a much bigger role in JOMOPANS in the future. Hannah's been really instrumental in getting some of the data analysed in recent months. So we've learned a lot about underwater acoustics in general, about calibration methods. We've joined in a fantastic workshop down at the National Physical Laboratory in London. we've improved our knowledge of measurement standards and of course of the data analysis, and probably most importantly, we've learned from the fantastic partners from across the consortium around all the North Sea countries, and it's been a fantastic learning experience for Scotland and for our organisation to learn from these other organisations. I'm not kidding anyone that there's still a lot to learn, but yeah, in the event that there is a project extension, then I think we're in a much better place now than we were back in 2018 for further data collection and analysis. And again, just looking to the future, an opportunity arose last month to redeploy a mooring in that central North Sea location. So it lies just inside Scottish waters, but in this relatively quiet area of the North Sea. We do on this occasion have a plan to recover it. It will be much later, well, probably January next year, on a chemistry survey that's going out in that direction. And the East Coast monitoring under ECOMAS is continuing. There's no plans to stop the ECOMAS monitoring. So year-round monitoring is taking place at the 2 sites at Helmsdale and Arbroath for at least the rest of this year and probably for the future too. If you have any questions for Marine Scotland, for myself or for Hannah, then please don't hesitate to get in contact. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Ewan. Yes, and if you have any questions, I think we can actually deal with it right now. We are running a little bit late, so we will move quickly to a break. But are there any questions in the chat for Ewan?
I think people want.
Hey, they are looking out for the break. I had one that was about that. Well, you mentioned maybe accidentally the word conflict, but I had already written down. Have with the interest a lot on fisheries in the Scottish area, as well as having a lively bottlenose dolphin population. Are there any conflicts in that sense between those groups interested in conservation or fisheries, or the ones doing the studies on sound?
Not so much for marine fisheries, but the dolphins have a very, very keen habit of hanging out around river mouths, and the salmon fisheries managers, the district salmon fisheries boards, and the anglers themselves, who, you know, some of which pay huge amounts of money to come and fish on our Highland rivers. They are the more vocal stakeholders, let's say, with respect to dolphins and what they see as an increasing dolphin population. I think it is increasing very slowly. I think it's more highlighted by the fact that people are now interested in looking for the dolphins and watching the dolphins, and the wildlife tourism industry grows, so the awareness of the dolphin presence grows. So the dolphins, I mean, as well as seals, of course, get a lot of they get a hard time from salmon fishers in relation to salmon stock conservation.
So is the growing awareness and the perception of that there is a growing number of dolphins, is that confirmed by your acoustic data, or?
It's not something that we've looked into much ourselves, but some colleagues and collaborators at the University of Aberdeen, under the guidance of Professor Paul Thompson, they undertake photo identification surveys and acoustic surveys for dolphins, and I think there's a general awareness that the dolphin population has not only grown since the monitoring began, but the range has expanded further down the east coast. The dolphins are seen far more in the Firth of Forth, close to Edinburgh, than they ever were before. There's very few acoustic data from that area, but it's something that we're aware of.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your views from the Scottish waters.